go out to the Boomer Jacks Bar and Grill Hotline, where we are joined by longtime Seattle Seahawks beat writer Bob Condotta. Bob, appreciate you taking some time to join us here.
Sure, yeah. How are you guys doing?
Doing wonderful, and this Seahawks team is a fun watch because, not too many household names outside of, 3 or 4 guys, but they always play really aggressive football. But one thing that has stood out is here lately, they've been real beat up. So can you give us some insight on how the team has been handling some of this adversity? The injury report today after practice not looking too great for guys like Kenneth Walker and company, and this team still finding ways to try to stay competitive.
Yeah, I was going to say, your definition of them is a fun watch. I'm not sure people in Seattle would agree to that. They've had some issues. Because it's the Thursday game, they can still be kind of vague on this until tomorrow. Usually teams, have to do this stuff on Friday for Sunday, so you sort of have about 48 hours, or you kind of know what the team's going to declare guys. But they don't have to do that till tomorrow since it's a Thursday game. So. Walker has not practiced since he got hurt against the Rams. He got hurt on the first series of the Rams game and hasn't played or practiced since then. That would lead me to believe it's probably a long shot that he's going to play. And if he does play, he won't have practiced in 2 weeks. So who knows how effective he'd be able to be. They're not super beat up otherwise. The other big question mark is just a couple of guys on their offensive line. They're hoping to get Abe Lucas, who was their starting right tackle for all but one game last year, but's only played one half of one game this year. They're hoping to get him back. But again, I don't know how super effective he'd be because he's kind of just come back to practice in the last couple of weeks and hasn't, it's been kind of a funky thing with them having the Thursday game last week and then another Thursday one this week. So they haven't really necessarily had whole practice weeks here. And then Phil Haynes, their starting right guard, has also been out. They got a couple other guys who've just kind of been, they've been given some rest time too, like Jamal Adams. But I'm pretty sure Jamal Adams will play. He's from, the Dallas area and never played at Jerry World before. I'm sure that's something he wants to do. So I would anticipate that he'll do whatever it takes to play. And, Geno Smith is, by all accounts, a lot healthier this week. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett weren't on the injury report this week for the first time in a while, actually. Both those guys have been laboring with some stuff. So, other than Walker, I think they should be fairly healthy with what are their main guys.
Now, Bob, around these parts, I've been kind of labeled the Geno Smith guy because when they decided to start him, I saw the vision. I knew that he had kind of been undervalued since his time starting way back when with the Jets. What kind of, questions does this offense pose under Shane Waldron with the guys that you mentioned, Geno Smith, when you talk about passing wise with the DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba? Like, where do they like to attack, and what's the strength of this passing offense?
Those are all great questions, and I'm not sure the Seahawks have really answered this year. It's been a lot more of a struggle this year than it was last year for Geno and this offense. He threw 30 touchdowns last year in 17 games, and he's got 12 and in 11 games this year. All his numbers are down a little bit, and they haven't scored a touchdown in 20 straight offensive possessions here. So they're not coming to Dallas at all on anything of a real offensive hot streak. But the guys you mentioned are, that's the guys that they have that they like to try to get the ball to are DK and Tyler and Jackson Smith and Jigba. And Tyler Lockett's really been dealing with a lot of kind of injuries this year, so his numbers are down a little bit. But some of that too is they've been trying to get the ball a little bit more to Smith and Jigba, especially after his first month of the year. It took him a little while to sort of shake off an injury and get fully into things. But he's been playing a lot the last few weeks, so they kind of have those three guys that they like a lot. And one of the problems they've had is their pass protection hasn't been great, and trying to get the ball deep to those guys has been an issue. That was one of their things. They went into the 49er game. They wanted to throw it deep against them a little bit. They take some shots anyway. They felt like they had some favorable matchups with their receivers against the San Francisco corners. I think they felt like of all the, San Francisco's obviously got a really good defense, but they felt like if there was anything where they might have something of an advantage, they thought it was that. But they never really were able to get to that because they couldn't block well enough to allow those guys to get open 20 yards downfield and all that. By the time that happened, Geno was getting sacked. So he got sacked 6 times in that game. So that's sort of been the story of their season. They've had a couple of games here and there where they've looked, sort of like last year, part of the Washington game. The Detroit game for sure in week 2, a little, some spurts here and there against like Cleveland, who's obviously got a pretty good defense, and they moved it pretty well and a couple of times in that game. But it's not been as consistent running offensive machine at all as it was last year.
Talking to Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times here on 105.3 The Fan, getting you ready for Cowboys and Seahawks on Thursday night. And I want to flip sides of the ball for just a moment to the defense, and specifically the pair of corners that the Seahawks have, the young corners Devon Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen, a local guy to the Metroplex here. Those guys have just been fantastic and incredibly fun to watch. And what can you say about the limited body of work that they have been able to show here for these two guys, and how do you think they're going to match up against guys like CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, well, Woolen, another one, just to not keep talking about injuries, but he's been dealing with some stuff, and he hasn't really put up the kind of numbers and everything that he did last year. He only played a couple of series against San Francisco. He was dealing with a shoulder injury, and they pulled him out of the game in the first quarter, and they went with a guy named Michael Jackson the rest of the game. But Woolen is Pete Carroll said today he's healthy and they expect him to start. So I'm sure as you mentioned, he's from that area as well. They got about 5 or 6 key guys that are all kind of from that area. And so I'm sure he's excited to want to go back there and play. Witherspoon has been the one real big kind of, not a surprise at all because he was the 5th overall pick. So they were hoping for a lot from him, but he has lived up to the billing, and they kind of use him in a lot of different ways. He's when they're in their base defense, he starts at the left cornerback spot, but he plays most of his time at the nickel because they spend most of their time in the nickel. And when they go nickel, they move him inside to there, and they bring in a guy named Trey Brown to play the boundary corner. So probably about 70% of Witherspoon's snaps are playing inside, and they like him doing that because it puts him in position to rush the passer. He's got about 3 sacks this year, but they also feel like just being in the middle of the field allows him. Puts him in position to make a lot more plays on the ball, and he's a really good run tackler. They like that. Their run defense was really bad last year, and some of that they felt like was, guys when they got past the line, the guys in the secondary were struggling to get them down at times last year. Witherspoon's really helped with that. So you'll see him in a few different spots on Thursday night, and they don't do a whole lot of trying to match up guys with specific receivers, so I don't know that you'll see him follow anybody specifically, but you will kind of see him, again, a lot of their games they've played maybe 80% of the snaps maybe in nickel, and so you'll see Witherspoon a lot kind of in the middle of the field.
Now, Bob, one of the things you were mentioning is just kind of the ways that, maybe Seahawks fans have not been the happiest with the way that this team has fared thus far. And it seems like that's kind of a constant feeling when it comes to Seahawks fans. What's the unique feeling this year? Like, what is it in particular when it comes to this management with Pete Carroll and the way that it's going this year that's kind of irked Seahawks fans?
Well, I mean, the thing is, they got off to a good start. I mean, other than the Rams game was a complete disaster in week 1, but they then won 5 of their next 6. They won at Detroit. The one loss in there was at Cincinnati, which was a game that they basically just blew two possessions inside the 10-yard line right at the end of the game, either one of which could have won that game. But they felt like they played, people were pretty happy with sort of how they played defensively in that game and all that. So for about a month and a half, they were looking really good, and people were excited about that. And with that, coupled with how they had played last year, last year everybody kind of wrote them off after the Russell trade, and then they end up, making the playoffs, and they were able to, essentially bring back almost all the key guys they really wanted from that team, and then add to it with another what appears to be a pretty strong rookie class, but especially adding Witherspoon and a couple other things that they did. So expectations were pretty high, and when they were 5-2, people felt like they were on the way to matching them. I think most people thought they had at that point maybe had a chance to win 10 or 11 games. They were leading the division there for one glorious week, I think, when the 49ers went on their 3-game losing streak there. So, but the last month has been really rough. They went to Baltimore, just got completely tattooed, came back and sort of needed to work a lot harder than everybody thought they should have had to beat Washington, and then kind of just blew a game against the Rams in which they took a 13-0 early lead, and then just did nothing offensively the rest of the game and lost at 17-16, and then got really just blown out by San Francisco Thursday. So, there's a lot more trepidation about where things are going. And, part of the issue is they got to go to Dallas now, then they got to go back to San Francisco next week, and then they got to play Philadelphia. They'll probably be, a 7 to 9 point underdog in all of those games. So unless they pull an upset, everybody's kind of looking at, man, this could be a 5-game losing streak that just takes them out of everything. So, suddenly it's definitely kind of high anxiety time when it comes to the Seahawks right now.
You can find him on Twitter at Condotta. He does great work for the Seattle Times covering the Seattle Seahawks, getting us ready for the matchup on Thursday night. Bob, we appreciate the time and enjoy the game on Thursday.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, you guys. Talk to you later.